All right. So we are here today to talk about technology. Speaking of technology, we are here physically in person, which is amazing to be back in person. I also want to acknowledge that we are live translating today's event, and so that's a reminder to myself and our panelists to speak slowly. To the translators in the room, if you're having trouble keeping up with us, feel free to flag us down. We can repeat ourselves or slow down. And we're also live streaming today's event, so there are folks watching us online. So we welcome you to participate. You can type in the chat. We do have staff who are monitoring the chat, so we will read your questions and pass them along to our panelists. And then the final logistical announcement is that we have put some pieces of paper on your tables along with pens. If you have questions at any point during today's program, write them down and someone will bring them to me. So feel free to also work with a translator if you need it translated so our panelists can read it in English. So with that, I'm going to offer a land acknowledgement and remind us that we are on the traditional lands of the Duwamish people, past and present. This community in particular is probably well aware of where we are located, right near the Duwamish River. And if you haven't visited Real Rent Duwamish, I invite you to do so to learn more about what you can do to support the Duwamish people. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists today. I'll pause first to make sure all the translation equipment is working. Looking for a sign. We're good? Okay. Things seem to be working. Great. So I want to introduce my two panelists today, John and Jonathan. Easy to remember. I'll start with this John first. John Morrison Winters is the Digital Equity Program and Broadband Manager at the City of Seattle. So John, in his role, works with digital equity professionals and he oversees cable franchising regulations. If anybody remembers cable, it's been a while. John has a long interest in the intersection of technology and society, and he came to digital equity only recently, having previously worked in aging and disability services, public transportation, and urban planning. So I got the pleasure of working with John in aging and disability services, and I know he has a strong passion for advancing digital equity for older adults in particular. And then we have second Jonathan Bierstein, who is the Digital Equity Coordinator at Sound Generations, I believe at the Lake City Senior Center, primarily. And this Jonathan's background is in electrical engineering. And he loves solving technical problems. He has spent the past year working as the Digital Equity Coordinator to help older adults navigate technology and to assist with providing access to device and online services. He found that he really loves using his troubleshooting skills to help people feel empowered with technology rather than frustrated. How many of you have ever felt frustrated by technology? Okay, yeah, some people have both hands up. So John recently has helped people with their phones, tablets, and computers, as well as helping people learn how to safely navigate the internet and manage online accounts. All of us have difficulty sometimes with technology, and everyone should be able to use technology in a way that benefits them and doesn't feel like a barrier in life. So thank you both for the work you do and for being here today. So the topic that we're discussing today, technology, was actually requested by you all. So we heard that this is something you're interested in. It's something we hear a lot from folks because more and more of our lives are happening online. We do our banking online, we talk to our friends online, we have doctor visits online, and it's really important to be able to be comfortable using devices and navigating the online space. So I'm going to first kick it to Jonathan. No, this John. And I'm going to ask John if he can just talk us through what does digital equity mean today and why is it particularly important to address?
Yes, hi everyone. It's good to be back at the South Park Senior Center. As Dinah mentioned, I come from Aging and Disability Services. I've been at Seattle IT now for only about a year. And really, digital equity, this concept of digital equity, in my own mind, it really blossomed during the pandemic. You know, we've known that there are challenges with technology, you know, for older adults and for others. We've known this for many years, but it really was during the pandemic that we became so aware, even more aware of how important technology is to keep people connected to their communities and to allow them to access services. So in terms of what digital equity means to the city of Seattle, we start from our equity framework, which is established in the city's Race and Social Justice Initiative. So that looks at the disparities that exist in our society. We lead with race, and we look at other intersecting factors that impact people's lives. And so it's part of a broader equity framework, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But in terms of how that plays out for technology and for digital equity is similar to other aspects of society that we look at. It's looking at where disparities exist. So, and all that means is where some groups have different levels of access than others do. And different, if we look at different factors, socioeconomic factors, how some groups are different than others. And one of the city's goals is to reduce disparities. So in the area of digital equity, we look at, we sort of use a metaphor of a stool with four legs, and we look at four different areas that we are reducing disparities in the work that we do. So those areas are internet connectivity, so just having access to the internet and an internet connection. That's devices, so whether that's a laptop or a cell phone or any other device that you need to access the internet. It looks at digital skills, so do people have the skills that they need to be able to use those devices and to be able to access the internet. And then finally, the fourth leg is accessible applications. So that's really kind of referring to the software piece of things, that not only do you have to have a device, but you have to have applications or software that work for you and that you're able to use. So those are the kind of the four legs of the stool of digital equity, and our work at the city and for the digital equity program is really focused on working with residents to improve those four areas of digital equity.
Thanks, John. When I looked at IT's digital equity survey, I mean tech adoption survey, it seems like skills is a really big one, especially for older adults. People may have internet, they may have devices, but if folks don't have the skills or the know-how to use those things, it's a big barrier. So I'm going to turn to Jonathan now. In your experience as the digital equity coordinator, what are some of the main challenges that older adults face when it comes to adopting and using new technology?
Yeah, so just expanding on the digital skills piece. Most of my work at Lake City Seniors, I work as a digital navigator, and what that means, I think that's a great word for it. Navigating how to use your phone, how to use a computer, how to get online. It's really challenging when a lot of it expects you to already know some key information. It expects you to know some terms. It expects you to know how to move your finger just right to get the screen you want on your phone, or how to put in a website. And many people don't already have those skills, and it's not always known, or people maybe don't feel comfortable admitting that they don't know something when it's really not their fault, and it's just kind of the state of where we are now. I was fortunate to grow up with phones becoming more popular and computers coming online, and having classes in school for computers, getting a lot of practice with those devices. And I really think of it like learning a language. Just like you try to learn another language, it's a lot easier when you're younger, right? And there's all these terms you have to learn. And if you don't grow up with it, it can be much more challenging later on. And I think that's what a lot of people run into, and it's not, not your fault. And that's what I'm here for. That's why I like this work, because I like to help people navigate and learn those skills, because it's not very easy to find the answers you're looking for. Often you have to use your devices, and this is a big challenge. Use your phone or computer to find information on how to use your phone or computer. So how do you do an internet search to find that when you don't know how to do that search? You might read a book, and books can be great, and they might say, okay, open up your home screen and open your internet browser. But you might say to yourself, I don't know what that means, I can't do that. And so now what can you do? And you might seek help from friends or family or a stranger, right? And maybe they'll help you, maybe they'll do it really quickly. Maybe they'll help you and you forget, and the next time they're not there to help you again, and you're kind of stuck on your own. And it's really isolating and disconnecting, and it's a big challenge. And then the main challenge after that is, once you've learned how to do something like send an email, do an internet search, your phone updates, and now the screen changes, and you no longer know how to do that because you remembered the locations and how to get there, right? And that's very frustrating, and so you spend a lot of time and energy figuring these things out for important things, maybe like housing applications, or paying your bills, or getting your internet service, or checking health results. And now, because you don't know how to get to those things, you're delaying important services and you're not meeting your needs. And that just kind of compounds and makes the whole process frustrating. So I completely understand why people don't want to use their phones or don't want to use their computers, because it can be really difficult and make it hard to get to things that were easier for you to do before. Especially, as we've kind of talked about a little bit already, and we'll talk about more, is everything is moving online, and you have to have an email, you have to go to the internet, you can't just do it in mail. More things are harder to get support over the phone now too, or find somewhere in person. And so I think digital navigators are a great resource that we should try to expand and have more programs for people to get in-person help to kind of overcome those challenges.
And maybe I'll just ask a quick follow-up on that, which is, we will definitely talk about digital navigators and resources available, but if someone wanted to practice their digital skills, where would you suggest they start? Are there 2 or 3 things people can start learning how to do or practice doing to gain their skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me personally, I find learning things best when I do something that I'm interested in, such as something fun or a hobby, right? So, and I kind of talk about this in another question later on, but I'll just talk about it now because I think it applies. If you enjoy doing the crossword puzzle in the newspaper, maybe you can download a crossword app on your phone. And by entering in the words, you're practicing using the touch screen, you're practicing downloading an app. And at the same time, it's not something really boring or frustrating like trying to pay a bill that you probably wish you didn't have to pay anyway, right? Where you can spend time doing something that's bringing you joy, and hopefully that will overcome some of the frustration, and then slowly, as you do that more and more, the next time you go to do an errand or try to apply for something maybe more important, you'll have some of that skill built up without really realizing it. And so I would recommend trying to find things that interest you, and that could be music. Try to find your albums on a music service, or go watch videos, or try to FaceTime a family member, and maybe you haven't done that before, and you want to use the video camera, and something that you enjoy to make it a little less boring or frustrating, I think is easiest. And I think, as you said, practicing, that'd probably be the number one takeaway, is just keep using it, even if it's hard. Just do little bits each day, and hopefully over time it gets a little easier as you go. Try not to do everything all at once, because that's just really hard to do, I think.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that playing online games is not a waste of time.
Yes.
Watching funny YouTube videos, trying to leave a comment or like something, that all of that is good practice.
Yeah, I think so. I think just whatever makes it easier for you to approach your device and actually use it. I think when I help people, when they're really frustrated, and reasonably so. They often come back more often because they're not using their device versus the people that come, and I can sense their kind of interest and excitement about it. They seem to remember things more because they're actually going and using it. And so whatever it takes to kind of get you on there, don't feel judged or worried about what it is that you're doing. If it's something you enjoy and it helps you get better at it, I think that's a great thing.
Much more appealing than trying to pay your utility bill. So, John, can you tell us a little bit more about what the City of Seattle is doing to bridge the digital divide, particularly for underserved communities or low-income families?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you. In terms of what the City of Seattle is doing in our digital equity programs, the first thing that we would point to is the Tech Matching Fund. And what that is that's a grant program. So we provide grants to nonprofit organizations and community groups in the city to do technology projects that are focused on those areas that I called out, that I mentioned in digital equity. So things like looking at connectivity, maybe by providing free Wi-Fi access in their facilities. Things like providing devices for people to use, for their clients to use, and things like providing skills training. There's also this idea, which has been mentioned, of digital navigators, which is a little bit different and newer area for us to invest our grants in. And that came about during the pandemic, and recognizing that sometimes people, and really we probably should have already been investing in this, but what we realized is sometimes people need that one-on-one assistance, that just coming to a class or something like that where digital skills are taught sometimes isn't enough. People need hands-on, one-on-one support with using the technology. So we're now investing in digital navigators, programs like the one at Sound Generations that Jonathan is the digital navigator for, and other programs around the city. In fact, for 2023, we had $545,000 worth of investments in the Tech Matching Fund and in digital navigators, and that funded 18 organizations. And that's something that we do every year.
Excuse me, John, can you say dollar amount again?
Oh, sure. It was $545,000 was the investment amount for 2023. Yeah, and that funded 18 organizations for 2023, but that's an annual investment process, so that comes up every year. Another thing that we're doing that's new to us is looking at ways to support enrollment in the Affordable Connectivity Program. So the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP, is actually a federal program. And what that does is that for low-income households, it gives them a discount off of their internet connection. It's a $30 discount, and many of the companies like Comcast or CenturyLink that people get their internet through have agreed to have plans that were $30. So what that means is then with the discount, those plans are free for people who qualify. So because this is such a huge benefit to people to be able to get free internet, we're really trying to push that program. And we actually got a federal grant to help out with this work, and we're working with some community-based organizations to do outreach and to host enrollment clinics for the Affordable Connectivity Program. So that's been huge for us, and it will be huge this year and next year. That's when we're going to be doing that work. The other thing that the City of Seattle Digital Equity Program does is we do advocacy work, we do planning work, and we try to coordinate with other agencies who are doing this work to make sure we're coordinating our efforts together. And on the sort of planning side and more research side, one of the things I'll point to there is the Tech Adoption Study. That's something that we do every 5 years, and that includes a survey and focus groups. And the idea is just to gather information on, for Seattle residents, how connected they are, what their technology challenges are, and what the situation is in the city. So last study was done in 2018, and now we're redoing that study, and in fact the survey is done, and we're just about to publish, probably next month, we're just about to publish the updated results that show how connected Seattle is. It's probably not news to any of you who have heard about the tech industry in Seattle, but we are one of the most connected cities in America, and we've made great strides to connect all of our citizens, all of our residents of Seattle. But at the same time, there is more work to do, and there are, as we look at that data, there are some disparities there, which, as I mentioned, are differences that we see across different groups. So we have more work to do in digital equity.
Can I ask you a couple of questions about the Affordable Connectivity Program?
Please.
So, first of all, what is the eligibility requirement? So who qualifies? And then second of all, how can someone sign up for it?
Sure, yeah, there is an income eligibility for the Affordable Connectivity Program. And it's essentially 200% of federal poverty level is the threshold. However, there are other ways to qualify. So, if you're interested, I would strongly recommend anybody who's interested to look into that. You actually can go to, if you have access to the internet, you can go to getinternet.gov. .gov, and you can go, and that will walk you through the enrollment process. It is unfortunately kind of complicated to get enrolled because you have to go through the Federal Communications Commission, the federal agency, and then you have to go to an internet service provider, a private company who provides internet, in order to do that. So that's part of the reason why we're doing this outreach work and working with agencies to get people enrolled. And so there are enrollment clinics that are going to be happening around the city. In terms of finding out about that, I would say, get connected. You're already all here, which is great. Information will come out through the Senior Center. I know King County got a grant as well for ACP outreach. They're going to be putting ads on buses and just trying to get the word out and make it easier to get signed up for that. So stay tuned for more information on that. Also, would encourage any of you, I was going to say this later, but you can actually call us directly. We don't do a lot of direct services at my office, but anybody who wants to know if you're trying to get signed up for ACP and don't know where else to go, you can give us a call as well. The digital equity, and there's a digital equity phone line that you can call that I can share out, and I can give out later. It's 206-684-8498. Is that number, and definitely come see me if you want to make sure you have that, or we can make sure it's communicated out. Yeah, one more time, it's 206-684-8498. Thanks.
And if you want more information about the affordable internet, we do, Meg over here is waving a flyer, so we have this at the front table, so feel free to grab one. I think it has the phone number and how to enroll.
Yeah, that's great, because I didn't bring any flyers, so I'm very glad that you have it.
Your team sent them to us. Thank you for that. So back to Jonathan, I may jump around here a little bit because we've been talking about digital navigators. Can you kind of walk us through what that looks like for someone who's seeking digital navigation support, and maybe what are the other digital equity programs that Sound Generations might offer?
So currently there's me and there's another guy who's a great digital navigator, Martin, over at the West Seattle Senior Center. He also works at the Ballard Senior Center. So those two locations in our Lake City Senior Center, those are where we currently have digital navigator programs. And what that means, essentially, it's just one-on-one, in-person technical assistance with anything you need, whether that's how do I turn the brightness up on my phone, how do I get connected to ACP. We help people enroll or apply to housing. If you're having trouble with passwords or you think you're getting scammed, all of those things are things that we help with. And so that's our main priority, in my opinion, and I think Sound Generations feels like this way too. It's something that's really necessary and something that's not very common around the city, even though now I think it's starting to grow more and more as John was talking about funding digital navigators and more programs with these grants, which is awesome. And so that's catching up, and the trick is finding those places. I think a lot of their Sound Generations and other senior centers are looking into expanding these types of programs. I know the Seattle Public Libraries is working on a lot of digital navigator type work. Different companies here and there, such as Goodwill, had a navigator program that I'm not sure if it's still active or not, but things in your area, there might be people just like me that are there to help you with your questions, and that could be really anything technical related. And I think navigating, like I said before, is a great word because it really is just, okay, I've taken this step, what's the next step, what's the next step after that, and so on. And it's finding all those different steps to get you to your goal, which is complicated a lot of the times. And we talked about even enrolling. Sometimes to get internet can be using a lot of internet or using the websites and trying to use files and uploading and downloading and emails. And it's really a lot of things you have to learn to accomplish things that maybe you'd expect to take a lot less time. And so it's helpful to have these resources, I think, and being able to help folks with their specific needs, because everyone's going to have such a unique circumstance. It is classes and online resources and printed materials are really awesome, but they also have limits too, and so it's good to hear specific needs and be able to address those right away while you're with that person face to face.
So if someone wanted to sit down with you or Martin, how do they do that? Do they just show up at the senior center? Do they make an appointment? What does that look like?
Yeah. So currently, I know there's a lot more people that are being served at the moment at West Seattle, so that's usually by appointment. I don't have the number with me, but I could share that. Maybe we can get out later together. And with me, I also do drop-ins and appointments. As it gets busier, I tend to do more appointments just to make sure everyone has enough time to resolve their problem. And so since I'm a contractor, I've just kind of come up with the number, which I can share with everyone later, and maybe send out some information about how to access us. We kind of serve the general areas around the senior centers, right? So West Seattle has West Seattle, and there's Ballard and Lake City, but if you know someone or you're nearby the area, I think we want to help as many people as we can. And so I'm hoping, and I've done some research, and there are some other options and some classes around South Seattle area, but I'd love to see more in South Seattle. I think there's a big need just as anywhere else, everywhere people need help. And so at the moment, I don't know of any just like that you can just show up and get help. I'm sure there are some, and that's just a matter of, these discussions are great ways to spread that awareness, and maybe people can come up and share with me, oh yes, I know they do this sort of resource here, these programs are there, and I think it's good for all of us to talk about and bring awareness so that maybe we can start sending more of these navigators up around the area.
And then maybe I'll ask the other John. Yes. So relatedly, the question is, can we please get a digital navigator person at South Park Senior Center? So just like to publicly log that request. And John, my question is sort of related to you. I know in addition to the Sound Generations digital navigators, the city of Seattle hosts a whole bunch of other organizations that also provide similar services, and also in different languages. I know we have a lot of Vietnamese speakers here today, so can you share what resources are available for people who speak languages other than English?
Yeah, thank you. Language access is really a priority for us, and so when we're looking at those grant applications, that's something that we take into account, is what the language capacity would be of the program. So for instance, just to throw out a few examples of organizations that have been funded recently, there's Via Comunitaria, which has a Spanish language. There's CISC, which is Chinese. There's East African immigrant focused organizations, such as the Eritrean Association that got funded in the last round. So we look at increasing and adding language capacity as much as we can. Just so you're all aware, and this actually I think speaks a little bit to the question that was just handed to you about can we get a digital navigator here at the South Park Senior Center. I would say I certainly hope so. We actually have the 2024 Tech Matching Fund and Digital Navigator grant opportunity is going to be coming out soon. We're trying to push it up a little bit to get a little bit more on a calendar year. So that will be coming out within the next couple of months. So that's something, if this organization, the South Park Senior Center, is interested, other organizations that want to make sure that their community in their own language has access to digital navigation services, that's one possible source of support that they could look to. So I definitely would encourage anybody to do that if they're interested. Just as another example, this is not so much on the digital navigator side or on the services side, but I just wanted to highlight the language access that we're trying to increase in our programs. The Tech Adoption Survey that I mentioned, that survey has, as I mentioned, has already gone out, and we're just about to release the results. But that survey was conducted in 7 languages this year, and that's an increase. Last time, back in 2018, we only did English and Spanish. So we really wanted to make sure that people were able to tell us, what their needs were, to tell us what their experience is with technology, whether it's older adults or immigrant groups, or anybody else who's a resident of Seattle who wanted to participate in that survey. So what that really does is allow us to tailor our approach and make sure that we're adding that language capacity and adding other things that are needed for the community to be able to access the digital equity services.
Thank you. And I'll just say broadly, these civic coffee events, they're an opportunity for the city and community partners to share the work that we're doing, but it's also a chance for us to hear from you all about what you need in your community. So thank you for raising that. And I think it's always good for us to hear the resources that people really feel like they need. And I'll remind everybody that you've got paper and pens on your table. If you'd like to ask a question, please do so. They can be run up to ask anytime. Okay.
I have a question. Earlier you mentioned about the city providing or give away free device. So the device is that that's a modem connected to the internet that we come as a facility or centrally.
Okay.
Is that a possibility that the senior can get that? Because most of people, we rent that for $10 or $15 per month.
Okay.
So if we own the device, we don't have to pay for it, right?
Okay, let me repeat your question so everyone can hear it, and then I'll let them answer. And you can tell me if I get it right. So the question is there a city program that offers free devices to people, specifically modems, to connect to the internet, so that people don't have to rent modems and pay a fee every month, but they can just get one device that they own and can get connected with? I'm going to ask John for the answer.
Yes, thanks. So that's not a program that I'm aware of in terms of the modem, to your point, to avoid having to pay that monthly fee, like if you use Comcast or another internet service provider. There are a lot of programs that distribute devices. I think it's a little bit more common for them to look at getting laptops or tablets to people. So I think that's a great idea to look at that modems, which helps with that affordability piece. The other thing that I would look at for those who qualify is that affordable connectivity program, because that does provide internet for free. And so then that's, obviously you don't have to worry about paying the fees and things like that. So that's the other thing that I would look into for sure, if you think you might qualify for that. Like I said, there is an income qualifier, but there are other ways that people can qualify for that. So that's the other thing that I would look at. But I love that idea of free modems, and absolutely that's something we could look at with this next funding round. That's something that an agency could apply for as well, to do free modems for people. Thank you.
I actually buy my own modem, so I don't have to pay monthly free. So maybe that's the good advice for people. Just buy the modem for $60, $70. Is that pay every month $15 and you never.
Yeah, I think that too.
Okay, so just for the sake of everyone, a couple folks have shared that instead of paying a monthly fee to rent their modems, they've just purchased it outright, and it was $60 or $70 in that range, which over time really does save money when you're having to pay a $10 or $15 fee every single month for that. So thank you for the tip.
Even the router, I buy the router and the modem about $100 and something dollars. I save almost like $20 a month for both.
Yeah.
For 4 or 5 years ago already. So I saved this money, I already have.
So he's sharing that he also purchased his router for $100 something, but it's lasted for 4 or 5 years, so ultimately has saved money in the long run. Well, speaking of kind of where we might be going in the future and kind of how we can prepare, I do have a question from an audience member, which I'm going to combine a little bit with the question for Jonathan, which is, the question from the audience is, where do you think technologies are going and what will they look like in 5 years from now? And Jonathan, I'll ask you first, if you can add your lens of what kind of adaptations or things do you think are on your wish list to tailor for older adults in particular?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll start with kind of where we are now and maybe some of the gaps with technology for older adults and where products aren't really being designed to be used as easily for those types of people. I think the biggest thing is, right, phones and computers, they're competing with each other. These are companies that are trying to make money, and their priorities are to add new cool features, make things look appealing and run really fast, and has this over that versus the competition. And this is just a broad opinion, and don't take my word for this as what it is, but I think that's sort of something to keep in mind when we're talking about this, because the priority isn't to make the phone necessarily as easy as possible for older adults. And there's some companies that are exceptions, like some of you, I don't know if you've heard of Lively, and they make phones called the Jitterbug, and they simplify everything to a list. Here's your calls, your email, your internet, and that's really great. The problem is there's not as many options, right? That's the main one that I know of, and I'm sure there's a few others, but they're not the same as all these other Android and iPhone companies that you might purchase phones from or devices from. And even that can be challenging. It's still a smartphone, whether it's simplified, there's still a lot of things you're going to need to learn. And so I think there could be things added, right? Each button could maybe have a pop-up that says, this is what I do. If you forget, what does this button do? Maybe there's something to do to show that. And there are some accessibility settings, without going into too much detail, that can make the device easier to use, right? You can talk into it for it to type rather than having to use the touch screen. You can have it read text to you if it's hard to see. And these accessibility settings are great. I think there's room for more to just, rather than having a device that can do everything and so much, maybe we have other options that just make phone calls and send some emails. And maybe for a lot of people that would be preferred, so they don't have to deal with all these other problems with using the device that kind of just waste their time more or less. So I hope companies could maybe eventually, as digital equity becomes a bigger topic and more awareness comes to it, maybe there will be people hired to make devices more accessible to appeal to a wider audience to improve their services. That's what I would hope for, at least. In terms of technology in 5 years, the biggest thing that I've been hearing about is that we're going hopefully passwordless eventually, which I think is great news. Something called passkeys is going around. I don't know if it's a perfect solution, but the idea is you could use your fingerprint or your Face ID, maybe some are already familiar on your phone, to log in to all your accounts rather than having to remember every single password. There's some, pros and cons to that, just like anything, but I think that's something that's coming that might be a relief to many people. Currently, passwords are a big mess for myself. I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. It's endless. That's probably the number one thing to help with people. And so I'm very hopeful that's going to become very relevant. It's kind of right in we're in the middle of it right now, to where it might start showing up on phones. You might see something say passkeys or passwordless. And there's still things to be aware of to keep yourself safe as you try these things out. But I'm hopeful of that. I think that's a big one that's coming to answer this question about the next 5 years. I think that will save a lot of trouble. And I'm hoping things like this that make it easier for everybody will make it a lot easier for older adults. So unfortunately, maybe the reality is we're not going to have these accessible phones that are designed for us in mind, but maybe it will be easier just because we've improved other technologies, and that will save everyone some hassle. So that's, I think, maybe the more optimistic, realistic approach that I can see. But I think if I can just quickly add on, even though these phones might not be designed, or computers might not be designed so effectively for you, I think we and you and everyone can take steps to kind of work around that. And I wrote some things here in a list, but the summary is just simplify everything as much as you can. Try to stick to one email address. Try to not switch between too many devices. Maybe just have the one phone that you get really used to, or computer that you're comfortable with. If you don't know, ask for help and remove all the apps and programs you don't need. Try to just do what you need and keep it simple. The more you add, the more pop-ups you get and spam email and all that you might click and interact with. It's just going to sort of grow and grow and grow, and I think that causes a lot of problems. And so if you can kind of just stick to the essentials, organize your passwords, whether that's in a notebook, which people maybe say don't do or do, but I'd say do whatever works for you. If you need to write them down, write them down. If you want to ask a family member, a friend, or go to a digital navigator to look into what's called a password manager, you can use that to organize your passwords and have them fill it in for you. There's things you can do to kind of take all the stress and kind of put it elsewhere, take it out of the equation, so to speak, and try to just make it so that you can easily send a message, easily get to the internet, and be able to communicate with people and connect. And that's easier said than done, but I think just little steps, if you find ways to simplify things, will make it a lot easier.
Yeah, if I may just add, wow, that's good advice for anybody, I think. And just popped into my mind, one of the things that we saw in the tech adoption study that we just did was when we asked what people are interested in learning about technology. Really, maybe this should have been obvious, but number one or maybe number two answer was staying safe and secure online. And I feel like people are taking advantage of, and older adults are taking advantage of on the internet with all these scams that are going on out there. And I think that's great advice for that too, is the more you can kind of simplify, I think the more benefit that there will be, because then you'll kind of know what to expect in terms of what's coming in into your email inbox, or phone calls and things like that. So I think that's really good advice.
I got about 100 phone calls a day spam.
Yeah.
And then I call back and say, welcome to what I do.
Yeah, commenters mentioned getting spam emails, phone calls, and yeah, it's really tough to manage. And that's one area where I know we've seen a lot of agencies have started to provide training and information on how to prevent and avoid being scammed, because that's a real concern to a lot of people.
I think if they have something to control those things, and the system on the satellite, to whether the phone company or whatever, so they can control that. But they don't.
Yeah, so for those who can't hear, people are just voicing the frustration of all of the spam calls that I know we're all getting so many times a day. I know it makes me not want to answer my phone. And it's frustrating that that's not regulated in a way, and we're having to deal with it at the consumer level on a daily basis. And maybe we just have, we don't have a ton of time left, but since we're on this topic, and I know it's something that folks are often interested in, do either of you have just maybe like a top 3 tips on protecting yourself from online and digital scams?
Well, one thing I'd point to is don't give out your personally identifying information if somebody calls or emails. So I guess that's number one for me. But did you have other things, Jonathan?
Yes, where to begin? Yeah, a lot of things. Main one is, if it's very aggressive, you have to act now. We're about to erase your data, take all your money. Unless you do this, that's probably a scam. The companies that are legitimate aren't going to be that aggressive. and they're not going to be writing in all capital letters and shouting at you and trying to get something from you right away. So I think that tip would be just take your time. If you see something that scares you and it's, oh, something's happening, do I need to act on this? Ask someone else if you can. I know that's not always possible, but have someone from an outside perspective that might say, oh yeah, this is a scam, you're okay. You know, it's hard. Sometimes when it's happening to you, you can get flustered and it's hard to really analyze it. Yeah, so yeah, number one, take your time and watch out. If it's really aggressive, it's probably scam. Two, I always check the email address, if it's an email, or the phone number, but it's harder to tell, but email. Usually random characters, some strange words or letters and numbers. It's not Facebook or Apple or Google or my bank that's emailing me. It's just a random person. So yeah, check that as number two. I think another one comes to mind is just don't press links at all. Yeah, if you can't avoid it. Sometimes when you decide, yes, this is legitimate, I'll press this link, I have it verified. Browsers, like if you use Google Chrome or Edge or Safari, they're getting better and better to where they will warn you, oh, this is a strange link, it won't just open right away. So you don't have to be too nervous, but just try to avoid it because you never know what you might get yourself into. But yeah, just in general, I think don't jump to action right away. Take a moment to think and look closely for strange clues and ask for help when you need to.
Thank you. And I remember last year learning that around April, a lot of tax scams come around. And so you might start getting emails or phone calls from the fake IRS demanding something from you, but don't panic. It's probably a scam. I did want to go back to one thing John mentioned earlier when we were talking about the eligibility for the Affordable Internet Program. John mentioned that the eligibility is 200% of the federal poverty line, which I just wanted to share the number amount for that. So for one person, that's someone who earns $29,160 a year. For a family of four, that number is $60,000. So if somebody has that income or below, you would qualify for the affordable, essentially free in Seattle internet program. So definitely worth looking into. I said free. Technically, it's affordable internet connectivity, but oftentimes providers have agreed for a $30 bill that gets waived. So effectively, it becomes free. And in our last couple of minutes, I think I'll just turn it over to our panelists and ask if there's anything you would like to leave us with. I know we didn't get through all of our pre-planned questions, so I'll let you pick what you feel is most important to share.
Yeah, thank you, Dinah. You know, for me, the importance of this topic is not about having the fanciest, newest computer or equipment or phone. You know, for the city of Seattle, we're not trying to sell you something. We're not Apple, we're not Microsoft. Our work is about equity and reducing disparities, right? So for communities or groups or individuals who are impacted by lack of access to resources or lack of understanding of technology or access to technology, we want to eliminate those disparities. And we want to make sure that older adults and really everybody in our community has what they need to fully participate in their community and to thrive. So that's really our focus. That's what this work is about for me. And I'm really just happy to be here today to be able to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I think to add on and wrap up from my perspective here, I know a lot of people probably have things they need done now and need help with, and so it's great to see like the city and the programs grow and develop right in the middle of it, but there might still be some gaps or places where you can't find help too easily yet. Maybe we've said all these great things, these resources, then you go home and you run into not remembering exactly what that program was that was nearby or that website we mentioned, or maybe it's just so hard for you to find that info that we talked about. And so I think the best thing you can do is just try to practice and get better at finding information online. And so trying to use an internet browser like Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Safari, being able to do a search and getting comfortable with how to find websites, how to find information. Like I said earlier, it's tricky because all these skills and terms and things to learn. A lot of it's online, so you already kind of need to know some things to get to that information. And I think, outside, a lot of things will change, and hopefully it sounds like there's going to be a lot of great services and programs growing and coming. But if there's time now that you need help, I think you just build your confidence in being able to find information online and hopefully get what you need, find answers, ask your questions in the browser, and hopefully you'll find some answers to those questions so that you can get things done sooner than later. And when in doubt, ask for help, find digital navigators. And yeah, take advantage of these resources. Look into ACP or have someone help you find how to get discounts and get reasonable devices and internet service. So, yeah.
Okay, we'll take one more question from, sure. Yeah, so the question is to repeat how to find digital navigators. So maybe I'll let Jonathan, you can answer for Sound Generations, and then John, you want to share from the city?
Yeah. So for Sound Generations, right, West Seattle Senior Center, Ballard Senior Center, Lake City Senior Center. I've also been doing some work with Gen Pride, which is a nonprofit group in Capitol Hill, and so I'm there occasionally on Tuesdays, and that they're moving into some new Pride Place low-income housing, which is awesome. So they're going to take some time for that to show up, so that's probably a TBD. In general, I know there's other programs around the area. John mentioned a bunch, especially with more language support, which is great. I do know it's the Workforce Council. They have something called the Digital Equity Asset Map. It's an online map that shows you these locations, and some of the ones I mentioned are there. They show you the address, what sort of service, whether it's digital navigator or just classes, computer classes, what languages they support, what their hours are. And that's on a website, so if that's hard for you to find, come talk to me and I can show you and walk through that. And in general, search digital navigator, your neighborhood online, and hopefully you'll find something. It's not guaranteed. I think there's still room for us to grow, so hopefully have some success, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think that pretty much says it. But if all else fails, if you're not able to find a digital navigator, the phone number I mentioned is for the Digital Equity Program at the City of Seattle. One more time, it's 206-684-8498. Or if you have email, you can email digitalequity@seattle.gov. As I mentioned, we don't provide a lot of the direct services, but if you're having trouble finding something, that's just another resource. You can give us a call.